Welcome to Charity Therapy, the podcast where we explore the ups and downs of the nonprofit sector and answer your burning questions. I'm your host, Jess Birken, owner of Birken Law Office, and I'm excited you're here. Imagine hanging out with me and my super smart, funny nonprofit expert pals. You get to ask them anything about your nitty-gritty nonprofit life and get their wisdom for free. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just strapping on your nonprofit boots, we're here to share stories and remind you you're not alone on this journey. So get ready to join the conversation and bring me the tough questions. I ain't scared. Ready to rock? Let's dive in. Hello from hot and steamy Minnesota. It's me, Jess Birken, here with Megan.
Yeah, she's cosplaying as a news anchor today. I like it.
News
That's
anchor.
what it feels like.
No, I feel like there should have been air horns.
Pew, 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 pew.
That was yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
There you go. Are you like an announcer?
Like, much excited. Yeah.
We're at like a monster truck rally. I don't know.
I'm going into my first robotics FRC game
That's
announcer
true.
mode.
Jess, for the listeners who do not know, Jess is mega nerd and announces at robotics tournaments for the teens.
Yeah. High school robotics.
Woo! Go Nightcrawler.
Yes, indeed. All right, so what are we doing today, Megan?
Today, we have a question from the listener today. Shocker, as we normally do. And before we get into it, there are a lot of kinds of people who we help that want to start a nonprofit for like a ton of different reasons, right? But one of those groups, like one subset of all these people that like to start a nonprofit, are entrepreneurs or business owners in the for-profit world who are seeing an opportunity in the nonprofit world. So before we get into it, Jess, could you tell us if there was like one thing you could tell all business owners about getting into the nonprofit world, what would that be?
Okay. I think that it would be, you don't know what you're talking about. Just the thing that I notice with folks who come from the business world is they feel competent, but they're not. And so there are a lot of unknown unknowns for them. And unconsciously incompetent. They're unconsciously incompetent.
I like that phrase.
About the nonprofit space. I didn't invent either of those things.
I know, but that one I did not know about. Unconsciously incompetent.
Well, there's conscious incompetence where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then there's unconscious incompetence where you're like, I totally know what I'm doing. Actually does not know what they're doing. And I think the struggle bus here is that I know how to run my business. I know how to run business. I do business things all the time. I can totally do this. And it's like an astronaut saying, I'm going to become a scuba diver. Yeah. I totally know how to go into areas that you can't breathe. And I wear a spacesuit and I can exist in a vacuum and I can do all those things. Clearly, I'm going to be the best scuba diver in the world, and they don't know anything about it, and it's a totally different environment. There are just so many rules and regulations that you would never even think would apply, but because we're a nonprofit, there's a special rule for that. And so they bring sort of their bias towards action as an entrepreneur with a lot of, I actually have no idea what I'm doing. And it can just be sort of a difficult combo. Yeah. Clients, I have to like put the reins on and be like, well, slow down.
Yeah. And just as a little, foreshadowing for this question, it can go the other way too, of instead of just having a million ideas that maybe aren't allowed in the nonprofit world, I think there's also a kind of business owner who's like, well, because it's a nonprofit, it'll just work. Like it's easier because it's a nonprofit. It's like, I don't need it to actually function the way that my business does because it's a nonprofit and it's a shortcut. So yeah, a little foreshadowing for you.
Or worse, they're like, I'm going to use this creatively to get a tax advantage for myself, which those people don't become our clients.
Yikes. All right. Well, let's jump straight into it here. So our listener says, I'm an instructor at a small figure skating school. We've been around for about 30 years, and there's been some changes in ownership as time goes on. A couple of years ago, the current owner bought the school mostly because she didn't want it to go out of business, but she doesn't want to be involved in running it at all. We're not really making ends meet. Some of the instructors and I want to convert this into a for-profit so that we don't have to have an owner and we don't have to make this make a profit. How do we go about doing that?
Oh, boy. Yep. Okay. So first of all, the first thing I know here is the current owner of the school is really passionate about figure skating because you would never acquire a business that was failing if you didn't feel passionately about what they were doing. So there's some good happening in here, but then the hard part is I don't want to participate in running this business that I own. That's a pretty hard road for an entrepreneur. You're going to buy a struggling business and then you're not going to work on it. Well, we don't know. Did the new owner hire somebody to come in and turn it around? Like, just feels like no, because they're not making ends meet and they're not turning it around. So,
and considering there's a group of instructors that are sort of scheming about how to keep this thing going, makes me think that the owner bought it and was like, just keep doing your thing and don't talk to me about it. Like, I want you to keep running it like. And I don't want to care about any of it. And so clearly,
sort of an absentee landlord.
And she's clearly not in it for the profit, which this is the problem with the nonprofit word, because people are like, oh, nonprofit, we don't need it to make a profit. Therefore, we should just make it a nonprofit because the owner doesn't care about profit.
Yeah. Okay. So let's deal with the hard facts here. Let's just pretend that the instructors could actually make this choice for the business owner, which they cannot. But let's just pretend that they can. First of all, you can't change a for-profit into a nonprofit. So you'd actually have to start a new entity and sort of donate all of the stuff from the school to the nonprofit. And that's a whole rigmarole. So if we're already not making money to pay to start a whole new thing, reset up everything, make all those switching costs, that's already a little bit of a big hurdle for an organization that doesn't have a cash positive lifestyle. And then the idea that we want to convert this so we don't have to have an owner. That's a very nebulous sentence. That feels very loaded to me. Like the instructors don't want a boss. Yep. Or they don't like this boss, or it just feels very like there's an emotional undertone there, because even if nonprofits don't have owners, they would have to have a board. And that means that they would have 5 bosses and they'd be wrangling a group instead of one person. So I don't know that that's actually the improvement, quote unquote, that you think it's going to be, because it's not like you're just going to get to do whatever you want and there's nobody in charge.
Especially because, go listen to our conflicts of interest episode, but unlikely that the group of instructors who are paid by the organization would just be the board and you could just operate it all yourselves.
Right. So that's a whole other layer of complexity. If the instructors feel like they want to be the board, well, first of all, you have to convince this owner to donate the company that they purchased with their own money. You have to get them to donate it to this new entity, which maybe they want to do. Maybe there's some sort of tax reason they would do that or whatever. And then you would be the board and you would also work for the organization, which is a massive conflict of interest. And you would have to report that to the IRS potentially. We don't know how much money is flowing through this organization, but you'd be insiders being compensated. The entire board would be also holding roles where they're compensated. It's very messy. I'm not saying you couldn't find a way to do that, but the optics of it for fundraising are meh. And then that kind of starts to go down the other road, which is, why do people think that if you make something a nonprofit, the finances will magically clear up?
Because nonprofit, we don't have to have a profit, Jess.
You don't have to have a profit, but it's not viable. It's already not a viable business. So how would it be viable? Because just because we have nonprofit tax status, nonprofit is a tax status, not a business model.
Yep.
Nothing changes. Nothing changes. You would have a fee-for-service revenue model, and your fee-for-service revenue model will also not be working.
Yeah, if that's the only change you're going to make, it doesn't mean anything for your bottom line at all.
Unless the amount of income tax this business is generating is just like absolutely massive, and not paying that tax would solve all of your problems, you're going to have the same cash flow crisis that you have right now, except for you will have done all this work and gone to all this expense to start this whole other organization only to transfer this business model that actually isn't working.
And not to say that now you have a bunch of compliance and other things you need to keep up with that cost money that eats into your savings from the income tax exemption.
And you wouldn't have one boss, you'd have 5 bosses, and you would be regulated like a Fortune 500 company and have to deal with all of those regulations at your expense. So what I would say to this group is what they should be doing is figuring out what would it take to make this figure skating school actually function. Because I mean, we don't know, but I highly doubt magically just not paying income tax is the linchpin to making this business model work. Also, everybody is just like, oh, but we're a nonprofit, so then we'll get donations.
How?
Where? Who's going to do that? Where are those going to come from? What's your fundraising strategy? Why would anybody want to just make a donation to a figure skating school?
When there's a million other things.
Yeah, I have questions about whether this even works for an IRS application because it's a quid pro quo. Unless you're going to give free lessons to people, in which case, again, how do you pay for that when you already can't pay for what you're doing? I would say try to make this business actually work. I would spend money on a business consultant before I would go down the road of like, we should make this a nonprofit.
Because either you need to be making more money from the students at your school, like they need to be paying more, or you need to change your model, the expenses, like something major needs to change about the way that you function, not just, the status that you have with the IRS. It's not a magic fix by any stretch of the imagination and will give you a very large headache in exchange.
Yeah. Now, there could be something they haven't told us. There could be, well, you know what? Right now, we get charged $10,000 a month for ice time. And if we were a nonprofit, the municipally owned ice rink would let us have our ice time for 20% of the cost. And that would right side up this whole thing. Okay. Maybe, like, there could be a scenario where it does make sense, but unless that is your scenario where there is like somebody is standing there promising you, if you were a C3, we could fix this today. If that's not the case, then I would just try and make the business work.
And we hear this all the time from people being like, well, there will be more fundraising opportunities if we do this. And it's just sort of like, unless you know what those are, no, there's not. Like you don't know that. If there are real relationships you have with donors who want to give, that's a great indication. Or people who are already giving and want to contribute to the business and would contribute more if they got a tax deduction or whatever,
Yeah. In which case, I would say start your fundraising campaign now and get pledge letters from those major donors who want to give $10,000 to support the school. And you do that first. You can start a nonprofit anytime. Anytime. Every day is a great day to start a nonprofit.
Unless you're doing it because you think it's going to be easier than a for-profit.
Yeah. When I meet with clients in this kind of situation, often the takeaway that comes out of it is I want you to go find the grants that you think are out there and start forming those relationships and start applying for things and get a pending grant award that says, when you have your C3 status, we will give you this grant. And then it's a great day to start a nonprofit. Yep. It's always a great day to start a nonprofit. Yep. But until that time, I hate to say it, but it's a pipe dream. It's a fantasy, and it's not grounded in reality.
Yep. And you can do the work to get it grounded in reality. Like if that is a real possibility,
yes.
But it does take work and a lot of work in order to make it a real thing and not just an idea.
Yep, absolutely. So what's up? What are our takeaways here, Megan? Now that I've rained on this person's parade completely.
Yeah, so sorry. First, it's that knowledge about the for-profit world does not translate to the nonprofit world in a one-to-one way that people think it does. Whether you are trying to be a really wily entrepreneur in the nonprofit world, or you're not making it work in the for-profit world and you think that a nonprofit is going to be your savior, you don't know what you think you know about the nonprofit world when you're coming from a for-profit background. Also, another big one, there is no such thing as converting from a for-profit to a nonprofit or vice versa. Like that does not exist. They are separate entities. So if you're considering making a shift from one kind of entity to another, it's not a simple like flip of the switch. This is going to take time and effort. And then lastly, getting nonprofit status is not a magic bullet. There is no perfect fix of now we're just going to get a bunch of fundraising or people are going to support the organization because it's a nonprofit. As Jess said earlier and likes to say, nonprofit is a tax status, not a business model. So the nonprofit is not the fix for all of your problems that you might want it to be.
Yes. Well, this was what my friend Steve Boland of Next in Nonprofits would call nonprofit birth control. So if you know somebody who is thinking that starting a nonprofit is the solution to all their problems, share this episode with them. Seriously, like save people the agony. Give us a rating, review. If you love the show, I would love to hear a story from you. We will keep it anonymous. Question, story, incident, whatever, please send it in online at charitytherapy.show. And thanks for listening. Say bye, Megan.